Justin with Digital Tutors, an Autodesk authorized publisher. In this series of tutorials, we'll talk about tools and techniques in Maya LT for creating a custom optimized low-res mesh. With the advent of the high-resolution sculpting workflow, the modeled assets that we create can sometimes be difficult to work with in their native state. For this reason, various tools are typically used to create a new pipeline-friendly topology for the model. There are different methods for creating this geometry, and it's important that the method that we use be quick and efficient and give us the control that we require. Maya LT is built specifically for game workflow, so it has some tools focused on creating new topology. We'll cover setting up our reference model so the new topology that we create will snap to the surface. We'll talk about using quadratic interactively placed points and polygons across our model surface. We'll also cover the shrink wrap functionality and talk about edge flow concerns as we create a new mesh for our bird creature. We'll also cover some of the ways that we can customize how quad draw functions and look at methods for speeding up the retopology process on unusual shapes. Now in the end, you'll be able to create optimized meshes out of your own high-resolution sculpts. So let's go ahead and get started by setting up some geometry. Let's begin by setting up our scene and then talking about why we would need to recreate some topology on a mesh. So this is O2 begin. If you want to open up the scene file, alternatively you can also look in the data folder of the Maya project that's going to come with your project files, and you'll find an OBJ of this high resolution bird that you can import in if you need to. Okay, so this particular scene has a layer set up, so we can turn that bird on and off. If we take a look at the actual geometry, you can see that it's very, very high res. We've got about 380-some thousand polygons. And you can see that it is all triangulated. In fact, it's decimated from ZBrush, so we get the visual detail. But this model is not really ideal for coming in and rigging and animating it, just because of the number of polygons that we're working with. So what we want to do is create an optimized topology that still follows along with the shape that will allow us to create things like normal maps or displacement maps so that we can visually get the same look of this bird, but have an optimized geometry that we can then rig and animate and put into our game or into our project. Okay, so let's first sort of set up our scene here. This just has kind of all of the default preferences. I'm going to turn some things off so that we can see things a little bit more clearly. We'll leave the polygon display, the heads-up display, up, but I'm going to go up to display, and let's go to UI elements. I'm going to turn off the shelf. It gives us a little bit more headroom up at the top, and I'm also going to go ahead and turn off the time slider and the range slider. Now sometimes the gradient can interfere with the kind of when you compress the videos. It can kind of get some banding and it generally doesn't look that great. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. You can do that in the preferences, or we can just hit Alt-B to kind of cycle through some different colors. I'm just going to go to this sort of light gray color here. All right. So once we've got that set up, the key thing that we want to kind of know about this is that we want our geometry. We want to be able to create our geometry right on top of this, okay? And so that means we don't want to have to come in and start building things and kind of visually, you know, match up points and say, okay, well, is that on the outside, and then I'll come around here and move it around. That would be really, really tedious. So we want some sort of way for all the points that we create to be snapped directly to this surface. So then we won't have to worry about, you know, the position of points as far as in 3D space, but only on that particular surface. That would really make things go a lot faster and work a lot easier. So in order to do that, we would select our object and we want to make it live. That's going to enable us to be able to snap things to, in this case, new polygons to our object. So we're going to go to Modify. Right down here, we're going to say Make Live. Okay, so it gives us a little message, says that this piece of geometry is now live. So at this point, we are ready to begin our retopology process. So let's go ahead in the next lesson and we'll take a look at how we can start to add points, edges, and polygons to our live geometry. In this lesson, we'll begin creating our new low-resolution geometry right on top of our high-res bird. So this is kind of where we left off. If you want to kind of rename your geometry or whatever you want, you can do that. I've also turned on reference for the actual layer, so it can actually select this. So in order to start creating our geometry from scratch on top of this geometry, we're going to be using a tool called Quad Draw. And we can access this in a couple of different spots. We can go to Mesh Tools. We can find the Quad Draw tool right down here, or we can also come up and open our modeling toolkit, and we can find the tool all the way at the bottom under the Mesh Editing Tools, Quad Draw. So let's go ahead and activate that. It's going to bring up a few options down here. We'll leave everything at default for now. Now let's kind of move into our object. So at this point, our goal is to kind of create a low-resolution model that kind of follows along with the contours, but we can ignore some of this very high resolution detail. We just want to follow the main overall shapes. Things like the mouth, I'm going to go ahead and follow along with that. So let's start adding some points. So by just clicking on the mesh, I can add a single point. You can see that it's actually snapped to that surface. I'm just left clicking and I can add another point here, and I can start to add points across this surface. Okay, I can add as many points as I want. I can grab each of these points and sort of move it around on the surface. But right now we don't have any polygons at this point. We're just kind of filling it in with points. So in order to add polygons, we're going to hold down the Shift key, and then you can see as I hover the mouse over these points, it's going to kind of calculate the optimal configuration of a polygon, a four-sided polygon. So if I hover between these four, it's going to give me this kind of highlight here. If I click, I can actually add that polygon. I can do the same thing here and here, and I can very quickly start to add that geometry. Now I can still go back and move these points around if I want to. I can come in and add additional points, maybe right here in this groove, Shift, and I can go ahead and fill those in. Alright. If we hold down Shift, you can see that it gives me an indication that I can relax. And so then that allows me to paint over these points and actually kind of move and relax those. Okay? If I hold down the Control key, that allows me to automatically insert edges. So for instance, if I wanted another edge right here, I could just click that, and those points new points would automatically snap to our surface. Come back in here and kind of space these out a little bit. Hold Shift to sort of relax. And then there are other ways that we can start to manipulate this, but let's just spend some time working with these points. So we want to make something that is sort of optimized for the shape of the object. And so I'm going to come down here, make sure that it kind of matches up with the sort of jaw line here. Now, as we start to get into these larger expanses of geometry, we start to get these more open areas here. We can come in and hold down Control, and we can add a new line in there. And we can come in and then relax that geometry in the center out a little bit. So I'll come in here. We can just start to, again, add these points. And you can get complete control over the placement of your new polygons. Now, as we come across areas like this, we don't necessarily want to come in and create a line for each one of these grooves, because that's really, kind of wasting our polygons, because all those can be done kind of with a normal map or a displacement map. And so, what we could do is kind of hit the high points. So we could kind of come in here. We want to make sure to kind of follow along with that contour maybe, but we can actually have those polygons kind of span across that surface. And so you can see we're not going into that groove. Okay, and you don't necessarily have to even follow along like that. You know, you could have it kind of come all the way across here and just kind of encompass that. So the actual topology that you create isn't as important as the fact that you just want it to be, you know, roughly this resolution. So you can see how far apart my polygons are. You want to be able to kind of get the silhouette. So you don't want to just big jagged polygon up here. You want to be able to get that silhouette, but you don't need polygons to be able to get all this detail in here. Okay. So for instance, coming right along here, you see these nostrils. We can come here, and this sort of resolution is going to be fine for what we need, because that can be captured in a map. It doesn't have to be captured in the geometry. Okay, and that's kind of the whole point of our retopology, of getting the overall shape and getting something that will deform and animate appropriately, but also, you know, optimizing it so they don't have to carry all of that detail through. Okay, so just spend a little bit of time coming in here. We can come across the mouth up here. Okay, if you hold down Control and Shift, you can actually delete lines like that. Okay, so spend a little bit of time just kind of going through and creating a little bit more geometry to kind of fill this in. Again, as I said, not as important the actual flow necessarily, but just the fact that you want this sort of resolution. And for instance, down the neck, you want something that flows evenly, kind of follows a line down the neck and is evenly distributed across. Think of like a cylinder shape. So I'm going to draw a few more polygons on here, and then in the next lesson, let's talk about some of the options that we can set, some of the hotkey combinations that we can use, things like auto weld, and then we'll also look at the custom marking menu. So we'll do that next. Now let's take a look at some of the preferences that we could use with Quad Draw, and some of the things we can do to kind of speed up our workflow. So let's jump back in, and I've just added a few more polygons to the face, nothing too major, but let's go ahead and take a look now at some of the options here. You can see that under Quad Draw options, we have the ability to change how that mesh is drawn over the top. It makes it a little bit easier to see. We also have auto weld turned on, and we can also turn this on by hitting Control Shift and right clicking. You can open up a custom marking menu here, and so you can see auto weld is turned on there as well. So that's kind of two different places we can turn that on, but basically what it is that it enables us to come in and, let's say, drag one of these points, and when it gets close to another point, it'll actually weld that together. You can see there's a threshold amount here. Then make sure that we don't have any points that are sort of right on top of each other but not actually connected. And so that's a nice thing to be able to come in here and quickly snap those points together. So we can come in here and kind of snap these in, and we can hold down Control, add a new edge right in the center. There are some other options too. If we come up to our Options, Modeling Toolkit Preferences, we can also access this by going to Window, Settings Preferences, going into Preferences, and then accessing the Modeling Toolkit. There's a lot of different options here. I want to take a look kind of at the bottom portion here where we've got this Quad Draw. And so right now the preset's set to default, and so you can get an indication of what's going to happen if you hit this particular key combination. So Shift left mouse button will relax or fill, and then Shift middle mouse will relax selection. So I want to come down here to the bottom. Right now, Control Shift left mouse button is set to delete face or edge loop, and then Tab left mouse button is set to extend. And so depending on what you're going to do more often, you can change those around. So if I wanted to, for instance, switch those, I could say Control Shift, I actually want to be extend, and then I want to switch this to delete. So you can switch those around. It also gives you an indication here what happens if you hit the middle mouse button. Okay? And so, depending on what you want to do, I'm going to just leave those at the defaults so that tabs extend, Control-Shift is delete. But we'll just keep that in mind. If you're more comfortable using Control-Shift to do the extending, which we'll look at in a second, you can change all of those hotkeys here under your quad draw section of your modeling toolkit preferences. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Let's say that we want to start to take some of these edges, instead of drawing out points and filling them in, we just want to start to duplicate these edges. And so I'm going to hit Tab, and you can see here it gives me the indicator that I can use extend. So I'm going to just drag an edge and pull it out, and it'll work like that. I can do the same thing over here, and if I snap it close enough, it'll actually snap those points together. So I can start to bring out edges like that instead of drawing out the points and connecting them together, and then come in and kind of move those points around. Now that's working with single edges. If I want to extend an entire loop, I can use Tab, and then I'll just use middle mouse, and you can see I can extend an entire loop down. So it went all the way down to the back in extending that. If we hit Control-Shift right click, you can see I can also change this extend edge, extend loop, or I can extend an entire border. So if you have just a single piece of geometry down here, and you want to extend the entire border of it, you could say extend border, and then we could extend that entire border if you wanted to create a loop for like an eye or something like that. Okay, so we can come in here, and I can begin to, I'll set this back to, let's just set it to edge, and then I can come in here and start to extend this, and you can see as I get close to these, it'll actually snap to those, and then I can come in and do the same thing over here. So depending on how you like to work, if you want to start to just draw out kind of a base, and then just kind of extend down edges, that can work. For our purposes, we're going to stay only on this side of the geometry. So I'm going to go right up to kind of the center line here. So I can add points on the center, but then any other points I'll add off to the side and off to the same side. So I can come in here and start to add more points. And you don't have to do one polygon at a time. You can just hold down Shift and then just paint across, and it'll create those polygons that are all sort of connected together. Come in here, we can add a loop right in there. Okay, so you've got a lot of freedom in where you actually place those polygons. So I usually like to keep that auto weld on just so that I know that I don't at the end come up with any points that are kind of sitting really close together but aren't actually connected. It just makes things go really a lot faster when you're able to not have to worry about the points being welded. You know that you get them close, you'll be able to see that snapping occur, and you'll be able to know that those are nice and connected. You've got a nice connected mesh there. Alright, so I'll just come in here and kind of clean this up and hold down Shift to relax and move the border edges down a little bit. Okay, you can also Control-Shift, right click, you can choose how the relaxation occurs as well, whether it's affecting the border vertices, interior vertices, or so forth. Alright, so those are a couple places you can find information on how your quad draw is set up. Control-Shift right click to access the marking menu, or you can go to Window, Preferences, Modeling Toolkit. Alternatively, you can go into the Modeling Toolkit, there it is, and go into the options. Alright, so next let's take a look at kind of speeding things up by being able to draw out quad strips. So let's do that next. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the use of quad strips to kind of speed up our workflow. So that's one of the disadvantages of having so much control over the topology that we're creating, is the fact that it can be a little bit tedious in that, you know, we have to go in and actually specify exactly where we want each point to kind of be. Now, we looked at, you know, methods for speeding things up. We looked at methods of kind of coming in and extending edges out so that we can create whole new kind of sections of geometry at a time. So that's a little bit quicker than just clicking and adding, you know, points in here and going in and adding those in. So it goes a little bit quicker. You can come in and extend out particular edges, or you could do, you know, entire loops at one time. Well, let's take a look now at adding quad strips, so drawing out large sections of geometry in open spaces. So if we take a look back into our preferences where we looked at earlier, and we come down to the bottom, you can see that there's these little slashes, and that basically just means that one of these is going to be applicable when we're hovering over existing geometry, and the other one's going to be applicable when we're out in an open area. So if we take a look down here at extend, the same key, the tab key, is going to work for the quad strip, and you'll notice over here the middle mouse is going to allow us to resize the quad strip. So it's going to be the same hotkey, the tab key, that we would use to extend edges, except we're going to be using out in the open. So we'll hit the tab key. You can see as I hover over here it goes to extend, but as I come out along the geometry I get this little glowing sort of green quad following around my cursor. So when we draw out our quad strips, they're going to be drawn in the direction of our cursor. So if our cursor is on the bottom side right here, when we click and drag with our left mouse button, it's going to be drawn in that direction, which is what we want. Now, if you come in here and you want to draw it back up the neck, you don't really want to start from this point because you'll then go in and overlap. You can see that overlapping polygon there. You want to actually turn so you're facing the direction that you want to go. So if you want to go left, you'd face your cursor to the left of the polygon. If you want to go right, if you want to go up, or you want to go down. Okay. Now you can also resize your quad before you draw it. So holding down tab, I'll use the middle mouse button to drag my quad to make it the correct size that I want. And then I can come in and just kind of, from a good starting point here, kind of draw down along the neck. Okay, and then you can come in here and grab these. Let's do Control Shift, and I'm going to choose loop, and then I'll choose tab, and then I'll just extend out that loop. Okay, so we can use the quad strips to really quickly create a base, and then we could, if we want to, duplicate that off. And so, you know, now we can come in here and start to bring these down and begin to try to kind of match up this geometry a little bit better. And kind of come in here and match these up. That kind of extends down a little bit. And start to line this up a little bit more. And go back to tab, pull this straight out, snap that down. Okay. And then we can come in here and sort of relax these points. So we get a nice clean quad strips going around the neck, because this is an area that probably will deform some if we have this rigged, and so we don't want anything strange going on here. We just want to have some nice clean strips coming around. We can also, you know, go back to tab, and we can start to draw our quads around this direction, so kind of around to the center here. We could come in and add another edge kind of right in there. Just drag those points over to snap them, weld them together. And you can see you can actually start to work pretty quickly. Then maybe switch it up, and now just add some points. Shift to kind of paint those through. Okay. Come in here and relax them back out. Again, you kind of figure out just by practicing it with it, kind of how you like to work. You can also come in here. For instance, you see this area right here. Not everything is going to be, easy to make quads. So right here, you can see I can sort of make sense to kind of fill that in. But now I've got this triangle. Well, I can go ahead and actually fill that triangle as well. Okay, so if you do have an enclosed triangle like that, you don't have to leave it open. And so that allows us to come in and start to, change things up a little bit as far as how the topology flows, and we're not stuck just with quads. And you can come in here and continue on. So take advantage of that quad strip functionality. Keep in mind you can use the middle mouse button to kind of size it, and then left mouse button with the tab key to actually draw those out. And just like we talked about earlier, you can actually change those keys. If you'd rather use something like Control Shift, you can modify all of that in here, and you can see quad strip kind of goes along with the extend tool. All right, you can kind of do the same thing down here along the body. You can come in and start to add, quads coming down here, and then we could kind of extend these edges out in these large areas. And so, if you have something that's, not really intricate, you can do that fairly quickly. Kind of relax that geometry. All right, so next, let's talk about kind of extending some geometry along the horns here. So take a look at working on these sort of extruded areas in the next lesson. In this lesson, let's talk about using the extend options to create topology on little extrusions that we might have. So in this case, we've got these little sort of horns sticking off. We've got these little ones on the front and then this large one at the back. So one of the ways we can do this is to create our topology so that it surrounds the base of our little extrusion. So in this case, I've gone ahead and drawn some new topology to just kind of on the head coming around the base, and just kind of made it evenly spaced so that it's not too high res, but we get enough topology in there to get the overall shape of it. So now you can see we have sort of a closed loop. So at this point we can come in and Control Shift to open our marking menu with the right mouse button, and let's choose Extend Border. So that will allow us again to extend this border. Now, instead of in the last instance where we used this, we actually extended a border out from a single polygon. In this case, we're going to extend this interior border. So let's use the tab key with the middle mouse button. I'm just going to pull this up. Now, when we're doing this, we'll have to come in periodically and just sort of move these points around so that they are kind of reflecting the overall shape. You can see where I had a couple of points that are sort of buried a little bit, and so I just want to kind of clean this up and kind of move it up. You can see where these points are a little bit closer together than what we might want, and so we'll come in and just sort of clean that up a little just by clicking and dragging those points, and then we can repeat that. So we'll use tab, pull this up, I'll pull it up to something like that, and then I can sort of spread this out again. Because we're working from a large area to a smaller area, as we start to extend these edges, they're going to want to get closer and closer together. So we will want to come in and actually sort of spread those out a little bit. Okay, or space them out a little so that they're getting closer together, but in a way that is a little bit more controlled. Okay, we'll do the same thing now once we've got that. We'll just come out and just space things out again. You can see where I'm having to do that a lot up here at the front. As we start to come back towards the top end. And so in this way, we can begin to create this topology because, even though this is very high-res geometry, we definitely want to get this reflected in our topology because it is a big part of the silhouette of our bird. So we can come in here. Now you can see here where this has started to cross over, so I want to try to avoid that. And so I can come in and start to space this out. Now it's not to say that you have to use extend the whole way, up to a certain point. You may want to, begin using other methods. But you also don't have to stick with just the same number of polygons. So you can see as we start to kind of extend these up, all these edges start to want to come together. But we can try to space things out and avoid that. Or we can go ahead and just go along with it and say, you know what, okay, from now on, I'm going to take this point and snap it to this one. From now on, extending up, this is only one point. Okay, so we can start to space things out this way, but now when we extend that, we're only dealing with that single point. That will give us a triangle right there. But now we have fewer points to think about when we're kind of extending this up along this horn. Okay, so you just want to kind of continue that up along until you get out to the end. And you can do the same thing here. You can see I've sort of enclosed the eye. I can hold down tab and I can extend this down. And you can see where I'm starting to get a little bit of kind of overlap there. You can move these edges around a little bit. There's actually a point up in there. You can snap here. And so I can kind of begin to now fill some of this geometry in here. If I need to create a new line coming across here, I can create that and then maybe just fill that in. Now relax it a little bit, and that creates that sort of filled in look. Now you can see where we've got this large open area coming into a very small area, and so this is a good place to maybe come in and start to merge points together. You can do this just by taking those points and using auto weld, and that'll automatically sort of weld that together. And you can avoid having edges that are kind of redundant. So if any edges are right next to one another, they might be redundant because you really want them to serve to kind of modify the overall shape. Now even in here we've got a lot of edges, maybe a little bit more than we need, but you really don't want ones that are really close together if there's no sort of silhouette that's happening there. If it's just across the surface, you can get that sort of detail with your maps, and you don't necessarily need all that geometry. But again, the key is not what the actual topology is, because that's going to differ based on your project. The key is the tools to be able to create that topology. So, the actual how this topology looks is not as important as just knowing the tools that you can create your own. That makes sense. All right. So we looked at using extend to kind of extend this geometry up along the horn. Next, let's take a look at how we can kind of take these large horns or even kind of these limbs and create some topology for these very quickly using some simple cylinders. So let's take a look at that next. In this lesson, we'll take a look at using shrink wrap to quickly create topology for different parts of our object. So in some cases, we have objects like on this bird, we have things like the arms where they come out and extend all the way out here. Also the legs coming down, the tail, the horns, the ears coming out. And so, we could use some of the techniques that we talked about as far as extending the edges or simply drawing these out manually. But really, in cases like this, the topology itself is very, very simple. We just need sort of a cylindrical topology. Even on things like the arms and legs, the topology or the edge flow is going to be a basic quad strip kind of edge flow, basically what you'd find on a cylinder. Really the thing that we want to happen is that we want that cylinder to follow along with the shapes that we have here. So rather than coming in and drawing that out, which can be a little bit tedious, even if we use the sort of edge extension and come in here and start to draw around here and kind of move your model around and draw around to this side and then finally extend, clean things up, extend, even that can take a little bit longer. And so let's use some existing geometry, shrink wrap it around the model, and then we'll combine everything together. So in order to begin to do this, let's create a piece of geometry. So I'm going to go to create polygon primitives. I'm going to turn off interactive creation. I'm just going to drop a cylinder into our scene. Let's kind of move this forward a little bit. So we've got a simple cylinder here. Let me turn off the modeling toolkit. I want to open up the inputs for that cylinder, and let's just kind of tweak the radius a little bit. I'm going to take the height up, and on the subdivisions, this is the number of subdivisions that we want to go, let's say, around this arm. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 12, 8 or 12, something like that. And then I want to give it enough subdivisions to follow along with the shape that we're going to be kind of reflecting. And so I'll set subdivisions up to maybe 6 or so as a starting point. And remember, this isn't going to create maybe your final topology, but it can create a nice base, especially in those large areas that can be defined by cylinder shapes. All right, so I'm going to pull this kind of off and then duplicate it. Control D to duplicate. And then I want to delete, in this case, the caps on both ends. So I'm just going to go to polygon selection mode, face selection mode, and delete those. All right, now what I want to do is bring this into position around our object. So let's say that I want to add some topology to the arm. So I'm going to bring this down close to the arm, and I just kind of want to wrap it around the arm like kind of like a bracelet. So I'll go ahead and pull this around and just kind of rotate it a little bit. I want to bring it down onto the actual arm, and so we want it to be around the arm, kind of surrounding the arm. Now if we have parts of it that aren't, we can select those edges and just kind of scale those up a little bit so we don't have to maintain the cylindrical shape necessarily. Okay, so something like that. Here you can see that we're getting off a little bit, so let's grab those. I'll kind of scale that up a little bit and kind of move it down a little. I'll do the same thing here. Just kind of get it close. All right, so this is a separate piece of geometry than the topology that we're working on, and so it's still there, but this cylinder is a separate piece. So let's go into our modeling toolkit, and our object is, our high res is still live, so we're just going to take this low res and we're going to go to edit, shrink wrap, selection. So you can see with just a click it's automatically wrapped that geometry around, and there's a couple of areas in here that we may need to fix, and so we can activate quad draw, and I can just grab this point and move it down here where it goes, and now I can start to come in here, control left mouse button to add a new edge, and we can use all of our tools, our quad draw tools, to kind of fix this geometry. But it's so much faster than drawing this out manually. At least it gets us that nice quad flow very, very quickly. All right, and we could do the same thing up here. So we could take our cylinder, and actually let's do the leg. You could do the horn up here as well, but let's kind of bring this down and do the kind of the lower portion of the leg. That's a little bit odd. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. We'll decide what resolution we want. If it's on an end, for instance on the end of the hand where we need to have geometry filling in the end, we could leave one of the caps But in this case, I'm using it to create kind of something that should be open because we would still need to create the feet. But kind of bring this in. And I want to get it fairly close to being in position. And we can scale it appropriately. Okay. So end up with something like that. And if you want to get those edges at the bottom, kind of scale them out a little bit, space them out a bit. Now we're going to have to clean this up a little bit. Let's just take this and go to Edit, Shrink Wrap Selection. And you can see I just wrapped it down. Now you can see here where some of these points I've gotten a little bit off, so very easy to come in and start to kind of move those down into a little bit of a better position because it was close to this point, so it projected it up and shrink wrapped it up to that point, which is not necessarily where we want it to go. Okay, and then at this point we could come in here and use Tab to extend those edges, or we could come in and our basic tools and begin to draw this out. It gives us a nice base to work from, so we didn't have to go through all of that process of drawing out those basic shapes. So anywhere, think about this leg going up here, the arm coming down, any of these are good candidates for using that sort of a shrink wrapping. Now it doesn't have to be a cylinder. We could take a plane and shrink wrap it to the side of this guy instead of drawing out all of this. That'll work too. Okay, any sort of polygons you want to create, you can use that shrink wrapping. Now, right now everything is sort of separate. So let's select all of these separate pieces of geometry, and we're just going to go to Mesh, Combine. Now let's delete our history. So we've now combined these meshes, so now when we go to Quad Draw, it's all part of the same mesh, and we can combine everything together. So, if we were to come down here and start to work the arm down, or even if we used another cylinder, we can start to connect all that geometry up. It's all one piece. Okay, but just using those separate pieces allows us to kind of leverage the way Maya creates geometry with its primitives, leverage that topology on certain areas where we know we just want to have a straightforward kind of symmetrical type of topology, or even kind of a straightforward kind of plane type topology. So if we take advantage of that, it can really speed up your workflow using shrink wrap in certain areas like, again, these arms, legs, up here on the horns, or even open spaces where you can shrink wrap like a plane to it. Or if you had something with very custom topology that had sort of openings cut into it or anything like that, you could project that or shrink wrap it on so that it would follow along with the shape. All right, so that's a look at shrink wrapping to make our lives a little bit easier when we're doing our retopology. Next, let's take a look at mirroring our topology. So we'll do that next. Now let's take a look at creating the other side of our symmetrical mesh. So this is 08 begin, and you can see I've kind of filled out a lot of the rest of this one side of the model. So just using shrink wrap and then connecting everything up using the techniques that we talked about with Quad Draw, just kind of filling out not only this long little arm here, but also the legs, and connecting everything together, and just kind of ending kind of on that mid point. You can see that the tail obviously is not symmetrical, so I've left the tail alone for now, just concentrated on the body, going up to the head, getting those sort of feathers or spikes coming off of the head down to the nose as well. All right, so you can take a look at this particular topology. Again, I'll stress the fact that the topology itself isn't as important as just getting used to the tools that you're able to create your own topology. So if you want to create something a little bit different, or if you're working on your own project, obviously the topology itself is going to be a little bit different. But that's kind of the main key. I've tried to keep things kind of even, so we get some nice deformation if that neck needs to bend, or coming in along the body, trying to keep that nice and clean in case we need some deformation along the body. But if you wanted to, you could optimize this even a little bit more using, kind of making it a little bit lower res if you need to. It all is going to depend on the project that you're working on. So once we've got it to this point, let's turn off our high res, and this is kind of what we're left with. So we do need to create the tail, but before we do that, I'm going to actually flip this body and create the other side. So just as if we were modeling something from scratch without any sort of reference, and we built it symmetrically on one side, to flip it over, we want to go in and make sure the points are snapped to a particular axis. So in this case, I want to just make sure all those points in the center are snapped over to this x-axis, so I can kind of select these points that I know should be down the middle. And if you're not sure, if there are a lot of points, and you're maybe not sure which ones should be in the middle, you can go back to your perspective and just confirm that all those points lie on that center. All right, now we want to go to move, and I'm going to open up the options. I'm going to choose world. Let's turn off retain component spacing, and let's hit X on our keyboard to snap it to those grid lines, and I'll just snap it to the center line. So now all of these points are lined up, and if you see any other ones that are kind of off, you can line those up as well. Okay, so coming in here, come in and make sure that everything is on the midpoint, and then we can snap those over. You can see there's a couple that were off there. Okay, we can go all the way down to the bottom just to check that. All right, so the next thing that we'll do is just take this geometry. We're out of quad draw right now. We're just kind of working with this as geometry. We're not working in our retopology sort of mode here. And so we can take this, and now this is assuming that your mesh is symmetrical. Okay, if your mesh isn't symmetrical, then you may want to go ahead and create the other side. In my case, the bird's symmetrical, so we only did the one side. Let's go into mesh, mirror geometry, open up the options, and depending on what side you've created, you're going to be choosing one of these mirror directions. In my case, I've created it so that one side is on the X, the positive X, and so the other side would be the negative X. So we want to mirror it in the negative X. We'll leave everything as is, merge with original and merge vertices. Let's go ahead and mirror that. Okay. Now you can see it has created the other side. Let's go into the polymirror input, and I just want to make sure, I'm going to look anywhere I have points that are really close together. I'm going to take this threshold down and just make sure that nothing is merged, because you can see if I set this too high, these points start getting merged together. So this value kind of dictates how close points have to be before they are merged together. So it's set to 0.1. It looks like we don't have really points that are going to be closer than that. So 0.1 or 0.05 should work. And then you can kind of look around. And if you want to hit 3 on your keyboard to kind of smooth it, sometimes that's a good way of just really quickly checking to see if anything is disconnected. So just take a look along the midline, and if anything, you see any sort of bowed shapes or anything like that, it should be pretty straight coming in. So it looks good. So we can just make sure that it's all merged together. Okay, if we want to, you can see we get kind of a sharp line in there. That can be fixed by just going to normals, and we'll soften the edges. And so you can see that softens those edges along the midpoint. And even without the high-res detail and just our low res, you can see you can get the silhouette of it. You can sort of start to get a little bit of the details there, depending on how many polygons that you've added. Okay, so now that we've got this main geometry mirrored, the last thing that we need to create for our topology, our new topology, is the tail. So we'll look at how we can start to create topology for kind of odd asymmetrical objects like this tail coming out. So it doesn't go straight back, it's actually laying along the ground, and that can be a bit of a pain even to go through and do your shrink wrap by just bringing in a cylinder. It's going to be kind of a pain just because it's so long and goes in all different directions. So let's take a look at how we can address shapes in this lesson, we'll take a look at how we can create the topology for the tail. So the tail is something that you may run into when you're creating topology. That's something that is asymmetrical for one, so we don't have the opportunity to just build one side, but also it kind of is very long and it kind of moves around a lot. It's a very kind of complex shape in that it moves in every axis, and so we can come in and start to create individual polygons across the surface, but it's going to take a long time to do that. Now we could use our shrink wrap that we used before, where we brought in a cylinder and just kind of wrapped it around certain sections of geometry to create things like the legs and the arms. But you can see here it would take a lot of cylinders just because you'd have to do a lot of shaping on this to be able to get it to kind of follow along so the projection will work. So let's take a look at a method that we can use to make this go maybe a little bit quicker. So the first thing we want to do is kind of draw out a curve. And so I'm going to go to create, and let's go to the CV curve tool. All right. I'm going to start kind of right around the base of the tail, just from the side view, and kind of draw this up. We can use the wireframe, and we turn off the high res to kind of see this. So you can see that the curve's being drawn out. So I want to just from the side, just follow along with the tail. And I want to have enough points in here to get the shape of it. Okay, I'll hit enter, and then from the side we can right click, access control vertex, and then we can sort of move this around a little bit, and I'm just keeping it in that single axis for now. Kind of move this point up a bit. So we're just trying to get a curve that follows along with this tail. Now it's all right now in one plane here. You see that? So what we can do now is start to match up these points, and so I can just grab them and pull them over in a particular axis. So pull those over, come around here, grab this whole sort of row here, move that over. It doesn't have to be exact, we just kind of want it to be roughly inside of the tail. So now I can grab these, move all those over, pull that, and then we pull these back. Okay, so we've now sort of put the curve inside of the tail, and again, it doesn't have to be exact, but we just want it to be fairly close. So now what we want to do is create a mesh that we can use to shrink wrap this, and so we need to have a mesh created that kind of follows along with the curve. So we want it to be kind of cylindrical shape, so let's go ahead and create a primitive circle, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off interactive completion, creation there, make a circle, and so the circle is going to be located right in the center. I'll pull it up, you can see the circle there. So let's take a look now at our basic geometry here, and I'm just going to say view selected. So let's count the number of edges that we have right here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So we know we want the tail to match up with this opening that we have here. So I'm going to select the circle, curve the circle here, and let's set the sections to 16. Alright, so now I'll take the curve and then the circle. So if we've got both of those selected here, kind of turn that off. So we've got both of them selected. Let's go to NURBS right here, and then we'll go to NURBS, and we'll go to extrude, and let's open up the options. We'll choose for the style tube. We want the resulting position to be at the path, and the pivot will set to component. Let's go ahead and extrude that. Make sure we have NURBS surfaces turned on. Now you can see that it looks a little bit odd, and that's just because we have the component selected. So selected in the wrong order. So we'll select the circle and the path. Do another extrude, and there you can see now it follows along nicely. Okay, now it doesn't match the shape, it's just a tube defined by this circle that flows along this particular curve. So we can take this circle, let's turn the high back on, let's take this circle node here, and we'll take the radius. I'm just going to increase that radius a little bit. Okay, so we want it to be outside of that tail for the most part. There's a couple of spots up here that it's not, and that's okay. All right. Now, once we have our NURBS geometry, we can convert this into a polygon. So let's go to Modify, Convert NURBS to Polygons. I'm going to set the type to quads. Tessellation method I'll set to general, and then per span number of isoparms. Okay, in one direction we don't want any. In the other direction we don't want to add any, that is. In the other direction we do, because we want to have more polygons flowing along in this direction. So let's open up our attributes by hitting the attribute editor. Control A. And you can see in U it's 16, which is what the circle is. So we don't want to change the number in U, which is the direction going around this way. Here, let's set this to maybe 3, so there'll be 3 polygons for every section here. You could do 2 maybe, but let's go ahead and try it. Now let's turn off our NURBS surfaces, and we get this, our polygons. Now let's go up here, and where this shape is a little bit larger, I'm just double clicking on these and it's kind of scaling them up and moving them a little bit. So I want them to be outside of that geometry just a bit. And we'll do the same thing down here and right over here. We'll kind of move this over. All right. And then we also want to sort of fill in this geometry down here at the end. So I can sort of bring this forward. Okay, and then there's a few things that we could do. We could come in here to our polygons tools and we could use mesh fill hole. Okay, and then we can come in with our shift right click and go to multi-cut. And we could start to come across here and maybe across that direction and just kind of add some quads here to the end so it's a little bit cleaner versus having just a pole there. And then we'll maybe come down here and let's do the same thing up here, just to close off this end. Now we don't need to close off the other end because that's going to be eventually connected up with our existing topology. Alright, so once we've got this, let's come in the next lesson and actually wrap it to our tail. So we'll do that next. Now let's finish up the topology on our bird creature by shrink wrapping the tail. So we've got the basic topology of the tail, which we were able to create very quickly using a couple of curves. So now we need to actually fit it to our high-res geometry. So we've got the bird high live, and so all we need to do is come into our modeling toolkit, select the tail geometry, go to edit, and then shrink wrap it just like we did with the cylinder. But now we're working with a little bit more of a complex piece of geometry that we created custom for that tail. And you can see it really quickly snaps right to those points. Now in some areas you can see we don't necessarily have all the resolution that we might want. So we can always go in back to quad draw with that geometry activated, and we can start to add edges in here. We can relax it just like we did with any of the other pieces. Okay, maybe we want one more right in there. So we can give the resolution where it needs to be. Okay, we can put it there if it needs to be in a certain spot. The key is that we were able to create this basic topology across the surface really, really quickly. But we still need to combine it together. And so let's temporarily turn off the visibility of our high-res. Let's take both of these pieces. So we've got the tail and then the overall piece, and the tail could be whatever odd shape that you have on your model that you had to do something special with. But you can combine them now together. So go to Mesh, Combine. Let's go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And now I wanted to merge the points themselves together because there's still a seam here. There's a hole right there. Now I like where the points are on the body, so I'm going to move the points on the tail to match up with those points. So to make this easier, let's go to the Mesh Tools, Merge Vertex tool, and I'm just going to click on one of the points that I want to move and drag it to the point I want to move it to. And that'll not only change its position, but it will also merge it with that point. So now there'll be instead of 2 points, it'll be 1. So I'm just going to go around the surface here, always moving the tail points to the body points, and not the other way around. Bring that there, and you can see it gives you kind of a red line to show you, just kind of make sure that you are snapping the right points together. Sometimes you may not be able to see them, so you can always go back into your wireframe and kind of move around to get an idea of where those are. Same thing here. Move that up. And then this one. And then we'll do the same thing over here. And once everything is all zipped up, I'm going to take the normals and just soften those so we get rid of that line there. Let's delete our history and let's take one more pass at this using quad draw. So go back to quad draw, and I want to make sure also to turn that high res back on. And then right here on the base, I'm going to add just maybe a couple more lines in here just because I know this might be bending a little bit, and so I want to make sure that it can bend, has enough resolution in there, and I'll just maybe relax that a little bit. Alright, so now let's turn off our high res and let's take a look around this model. So we've kind of accomplished what we wanted to do on this one at least. We've created a nice clean topology across areas especially that are going to be bending. So think about the arms and the legs, the tail, the neck, areas up on the skull. Things aren't maybe as important because they're not going to deform. But you can see that we shouldn't have any problem when we go into rig and animate this. It should move very predictably. We were also able to get a nice silhouette for this so that it'll look like the silhouette of the high res, but it'll be low enough res that we are able to move it around. We were also able to get some of the features, kind of rough features, built in because it matches up with the low res, but with the high res, but it is in fact lower res. To see how much lower res, we can use the heads-up display. Now, right now, because our high bird, even though it's not visible or selected, it's actually still live, and so we can turn this off, and then you can see the polygons that we're actually talking about. So if I turn the visibility back on, we can kind of see the difference. So the high res, we're looking at about 386,000 polygons, and you can see all the triangles in there. We really wouldn't want to rig or animate that just because of the high number of polygons. And that's a relatively low number you could be in the millions of polygons. So we've gone from a model that is 386 1,000 polygons rather, to a model that is about 5,000 polygons, under 5,000 polygons. Okay, and so what this will do is allow us to work with this and now use something like a normal map or displacement map to get the detail so that it appears to look like the high res, but we'll be able to rig it and animate it and move it around in our scene in a very effective way. All right, and so I know that your project is probably a lot different than this bird, but the key thing really is to know that when you bring in your high-res objects into Maya LT, the modeling toolkit and specifically Quad Draw is going to be a great help to you in creating very custom low-resolution topology over the top of your high-resolution models. And it can take as long as you want. If you want to have complete control over the exact topology, you can really spend some time and get it exactly the way that you want, and it's very easy to modify as well. You can also use some of the tools like we use the curves and things, and edge extension, shrink wrapping to make things go a little bit quicker. So you can kind of get a customized workflow, get it as custom as you want as far as the topology goes, make it exactly what you want, or you can speed it up by using some of the tools that we talked about. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed going through this look at retopology tools in Maya LT. We'll see you next time.